Hey guys, welcome to another video on the channel. This is the second game of my coverage of the Djerba Masters. Again, featuring a nice miniature game under 25 moves. If you enjoy the content of the game and the channel, please consider subscribing. You just have to hit the subscription button underneath. It's completely free, no costs associated, and it really helps us a lot to grow towards that magic 1,000 subscribers number, which will allow me to unlock some interesting cool features on YouTube. So let's get to the game. With the white pieces, Grandmaster Parham Maghsoodloo from Iran, one of Iran's best players. I'm not sure if he's number one now. Of course, FIDE before going to France was number one, but Tabatabai is also very strong, maybe outrating him by a few points, but without doubt, one of Iran's best players, 2700 player, Olympic medalist, very, very strong player. With the black pieces, the legend again, we saw him a couple of days ago, Vasily Ivanchuk, who, as I said, was not having a very good tournament in Tunisia. So what are we going to see in this game? We're going to see an English opening, which then transposes to a Slav defense. Maghsoodloo is a very creative player. He doesn't follow the normal standards of play. He likes to play offbeat lines, creative, pawn storms on both sides of the board. So very, very computer-like player of the new generation, obviously. Let's go with the game. C4, English opening. C6, D4, D5. By transposition, we get to the main line of the Slav. Knight F3, and here black has a choice. He can go for the pure Slav, which begins with pawn takes pawn, to protect with B5, and if white goes A4, which is generally considered the best move, black gets the bishop to F5, preventing E4. Here there's a very long theoretical line, which more or less goes like this, and it's a game. So this is the pure Slav. The semi-Slav, which is actually very popular, begins with E6, and here again white has the choice of playing something very aggressive, something like this, which is tremendously aggressive, but theoretical, or just the Murano with E3 and then queen to C2. There's even some lines with the early G4. So you can play this in several different ways, slow, fast, according to your style. And finally, there's a Schlechter with G6. This one is not played so much, but I think it's better than the opinion that theory has. I think it's solid and very playable. It's a mixture between the Slav and the Grunfeld. Vasily goes for the fourth option, A6. Now this is called the A6 Slav. And of course the idea is to play B5. And depending how white plays, we bring the bishop out or we leave it inside. Very solid, very stable. Not sure if Ivanchuk should be playing this type of line nowadays. Anyway, here white can play E3, white can play pawn takes pawn, B3 is possible as well. But Maghsoodloo goes for one of the main lines, which is C5, just clamping down on the queen side and in fact preventing B5. If and at any time black goes B5, which is possible, white will capture en passant and then at some point play knight A4 and go for the C5 square. So against C5, Vasily plays bishop to F5, queen to B3, hitting the pawn on B7, rook to A7. This may seem strange, and in fact in the game the rook is very badly placed, but for the moment this is theoretical. This did give me a bit of a déjà vu with the game played, which we saw 2 rounds ago against Llada. Also, Ivanchuk was messing around with the rook on the queen side and didn't end up very well. Bishop to F4, knight to D7. Here white can play H3 or E3. He prefers H3, which allows the bishop to hide if and when black plays knight to h5. Also, in some lines, white could push with g4, e6, e3, bishop e7, bishop e2. Now I checked this, and this is more or less theory, and it's considered to be okay for black. Not fantastic, but it's very solid and it's hard to crack. Castle would be the normal move now, but Ivanchuk played knight to e4, which is also okay. When you have a cramped position, you exchange a couple of minor pieces and open up space for your other minor pieces. It's very, very reasonable. I didn't quite understand a3, but I suspect he wants to be able to play b4 later on, and maybe it's a semi-waiting move. Not totally sure. Maybe he was waiting for black to castle to launch an attack. Difficult to know. In any case, black should have castled, but instead he played queen to c8. And I actually don't like this move. Queen to c8 is a move that I just don't like. I've highlighted it in black. Bring my chair up just a slight bit. I've highlighted the move in black, in red. I mean, why did he put the queen on c8? Does he want to play bishop here and bishop here? Maybe that was his idea. Does he want to improve the rook and keep the pawn protected? I'm sure he had some idea, but it's a weird position for the queen. Take, and knight to d2, a very strong move. Here there's some interesting lines. Now, black played a very risky move here. He played g5, and I just don't like this move. Of course, that's one of the reasons he didn't castle. He should have gone back and castled, and this is the position he should have played, where I think white is better on the queen side, but I can still see black fighting for some initiative in the center. Instead of that, he could also capture the pawn on g2. In this case, there's a very nice line, which is rook to g1, and if bishop takes h3, e4 is a very interesting and nice entrapment of the bishop on h3, which I actually hadn't seen before, because normally the bishop can drop back. But in this case, all the squares are controlled, and the queen hits the bishop. So an interesting new pattern that I hadn't I hadn't detected previously in my many years of chess playing. So he should have gone back, as we said, but instead he played g5, and white played bishop to d6. Bishop takes, pawn takes. Now, this pawn on d6 is very interesting, because this pawn can be very strong or very weak. If it's captured, it will be a weak, and white will be a pawn down. But if it's not captured, and we can use it to generate attack, now this pawn is inserted in the position of black, very near his king, so black has to be careful. Of course, neither Parham, neither Vasily know for sure how this game is going to end. They calculate lines, but this is an imperfect position. It's impossible to calculate all the lines, know if you're better or not. So I think Maghsoodloo is using a good doses of intuition, also some calculation, the variation of bishop takes pawn, for example, but a lot of intuition. His sense of the position, his sense of danger, his high risk tolerance, and also the amount of games he's played before in which he's reached similar positions, and he knows that certain tactical options will be available in these positions. Bishop g6 is okay. And here the computer suggests h4 for the attack, or e4 for the attack. Parham plays a4. At first I thought it was to prevent b5, but then I realized what he's trying to do is have time to protect the pawn with queen a3 in case black attacks it, so he can have time to prepare the attack in the center. So that's, I think, the idea. So what Ivanchuk should have done is queen to b8, hitting the pawn, force queen to a3, and now castle, even though the pawn is on g5. White would have played knight to f3, hitting the pawn, and maybe at some point, some h4. Difficult to know. the best move. Maybe b4, b5. It's hard to know. Will this pawn end up falling? Or will white conserve the pawn and open up the game? Hard to know. A complicated position. The computer says white is slightly better, but if I saw this game, I would just not know who's better really. Instead of that, Ivanchuk played a5. I just don't think he has time to play this sort of moves. h4, fantastic play. Hitting the pawn on g5. Can't be protected because pawn takes pawn and there's a pin. So pawn takes pawn and now e4. Very good move. Keeping the attack on this one, but threatening e5, and then with this pawn structure, there's no chance the d6 pawn will fall. So black has to capture. Take, 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 take. And now, look at the position. It's opened up. White is threatening queen to g3 and queen to g7. Black's rook on a7 is especially out of play. And the rook on a1, which I've marked in yellow, will have a very interesting role. Try to think now where that rook will be developed to, so you can improve your intuition. Now queen d8 is already a bad move, and after this move, black is in trouble. The computer says that black can still hold with a very difficult line to spot. The computer obviously finds it. A human wouldn't. Rook to g8 to prevent queen to g3. Sack the pawn on h7. Knight to f6 hitting the rook. And now queen to d8. And after queen to h3, king to d7 with the idea knight to d5. The computer can hold this position. Yes. Can a human find this sort of line? Very difficult. And even so, it's still a game, of course. Ivanchuk played queen to d8, attacking the rook, but queen to g3 is very strong. King to f8 to stop the queen coming in, and now queen to f4. Now, the threat is just to pick up the pawn on e4, but also suggesting a check on the move queen h6. And I suspect that already here, Parham had spotted the subsequent development of this rook, and queen f4 also, as you will see, is part of that plan. Queen to f6, queen takes e4, rook a8, finally trying to get the rook into the center. Notice how the pawn on d6 doesn't allow the king to come to e7 and communicate the rooks. And now rook to a3, fantastic move. Swinging the rook over, the Luft, and getting the rook to the game. Queen to g5, and rook to f3. And here, Vasily had enough and decided to resign. The threats are very dangerous. We have a threat of queen takes e6 because of the pin. But also, rook to f4 is another threat. And also rook takes h7 is another threat. There is no way he can save this position. For example, if he checks on c1, we just block with the bishop and then finish off as I showed you before. Or if he brings his knight to the defense, queen f4, attacking the queen and attacking the knight. And after queen takes f4, rook h takes f4, and black is completely lost. For example, this position, I would say, is completely hopeless. There's no way you're going to save this position. So, Ivanchuk resigned, left the game just under the 25 move mark, which is our threshold for miniatures. And I think here, in this game, you can easily detect the style of play of Parham Maghsoodloo, one of the world's best players from Iran. And one of my goals with this channel is also to bring you a bit more information and knowledge about these really strong players who maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but you get to see how they play, their styles, and a bit more of their background. So, I hope you enjoyed the game. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, and please If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button and let's go for those 1,000. And I will start doing some online lessons and other interesting features for you guys. And tell me where you're signing in from. YouTube gives me some statistics, but it's good to know. And also, what time do you enjoy watching these videos? It's a good idea for me to be able to post in your regular times. Improve, enjoy, have fun. See you in the next video.